Thanks for tuning in to this episode 6, The Gospel of Thomas, Take It Easy. As the country rock group The Eagles sing, don't let your own wheels drive you crazy. The last lecture focused on the fundamental Gospel of Thomas teaching, that is, eliminate the self. Most of the remaining 113 Thomas sayings connect in some way to that one teaching. Modern science tells us that the atom, out of which all physical objects are made, is a derivative of consciousness. Furthermore, matter can't exist unless an intent for it to exist is expressed. Belief in the self is the way the human expresses his or her intent for physical presence. Thus, when self is eliminated, so is the intent, and the body disappears. It's just as the Buddha said, the world is empty when it is empty of self. This is how the Gospel of Thomas connects to the Shroud of Turin. The shroud is the tangible proof that the body of, arguably, the most selfless man in human history vanished from sight, and he left behind an image as proof of what took place. Thomas teaches us how to eliminate self. It is eliminated by finding sameness in the infinitely diverse forms that we know through visual sense perception. Sameness is found by becoming non-dualistic in behavior. Finding sameness is a first-century application of Einstein's world-famous 21st century formula, E = mc squared. The formula means that at the very base of existence, all physical objects, and that includes the human body, are in fact the same, just as Jesus taught. They are primordial energy E organized into bulk and form. M, energy E, and mass are complementary aspects of each other. So, the truth is, all physical objects are the same. The challenge is to learn to look through the infinite multiplicities that come before us and find the sameness. When this happens, the self, the mind figure that makes us think we're different from everything in our field of vision, is eliminated. It is eliminated, for there's no longer anything to be different from. Self-consciousness, worry, fret, fuss, and the like are disruptive to the sameness which is sought. They give the self something to cling to. As a kid, one of my favorite comic books was Mad Magazine with cover boy Walter E. Newman and his "What? Me worry" attitude. Thomas' teaching direct us to make Alfred E. look like a worrywart. In other words, learn to take it easy. Take, for example, Thomas saying number 37. Here Jesus tells the disciples that in order to be like him, they must deliberately put themselves in situations that challenge their stability in finding sameness in everything. Specifically, he tells the disciples they will acquire his nature when you strip without being ashamed, and then you take your clothes and put them under your feet like little children and trample them. In other words, do something that is outrageously counterculture in a highly visible social setting and think nothing of it, which is to say, I'm naked, you're clothed, but who cares? Learn to take it easy. After all, at the core of existence, we're all the same primordial energy that has taken on bulk and form. Could you do this as if it was normal behavior, completely worry-free, about what the clothed ones around you might think? Jesus says he can, and you can, then if you will have found your true nature and be like him. In other words, saying number 37 is about ingraining an attitude of what one thinks of me is none of my business, while going about doing whatever you want, where you want, when you want, totally free of worry about the appropriateness of the action, free from the opinions of others. Jesus didn't give a hoot about what people thought of him. He lived with complete freedom and did whatever he wanted, when he wanted, and he was not at all bashful about it. He was totally selfless. And if we are to acquire true nature, i.e., our Jesus nature, we must be that way too. You know, there's an interesting connection to saying number 37 with an incident recorded in Mark's Gospel. In Mark chapter 14, verses 51 to 52, we read of a young man running away naked when the rowdy, militant mob arrived in the Garden of Gethsemane to arrest Jesus. Apparently, the naked young man had been covered by a sheet, which was pulled away from him as he fled the arrest scene. This particular passage throws Orthodox theologians for a loop. Thomas provides a possible explanation. Perhaps Jesus was teaching up to the very end of his ministry, and an initiation was taking place when the arresting mob arrived. The need for complete worry-free living is echoed in saying number 6. Here Jesus instructs the disciples, do not lie and don't do what you hate. Lies have lingering effects. Sooner or later, they come home to roost. And until they do, the liar must be on his tippy toes, keeping his protective guard up. Lies produce an enduring, uncomfortable feeling for fear of being exposed. This fear is breeding ground for the self. The same goes for doing things one hates to do. Jesus tells us, if you hate doing something, then stop doing it. If you don't cease, the hate will will give the self something to cling to. Jesus was poster boy for not doing things one hated to do. Rule breaker par excellence, he didn't give a flip about what people thought. For example, he ignored dietary restrictions. He worked on the Sabbath. He dined with sinners and tax collectors. He healed the sick, a job that was reserved for ordained temple priests. He masqueraded as the long-awaited Old Testament king by staging an outrageous donkey parade on the first Palm Sunday. And he wrecked the tables of the temple money exchangers during the Passover feast. At his trial, under interrogation by Herod Antipas, the Tetrarch of Galilee, he said nothing. He brashly snubbed a kingly figure. In the saying, Jesus goes on to teach, after all, there's nothing hidden that will not be revealed, and there's nothing covered up that will remain dismissed. In other words, if the answer to a particular concern doesn't come to you, let it go. Back off. It will come sooner or later. Take it easy. Don't let your own wheels drive you crazy. This particular command also points to the need to eliminate conceptual thought. Man's thinking can be likened to a jungle monkey swinging mindlessly from tree to tree. Typically, One thought leads to another, and pretty soon a cascading, daisy chain of thoughts emerges, overwhelming the mind and enlivening the self. Yeah. I suspect you know what I'm talking about. Man is a thinking machine. He cannot not think. But what he can do is allow his thoughts to run their course and dissolve on their own. A thought arises, and selfless man responds, "Oh, I just had a thought about such and such." And then he lets it dissolve on its own. The thought, if pursued, will soon lead to identity with the self. The cascaded thinking ultimately winds up infiltrated with the I, me, my, mine, yours, his, hers pronouns, and they in turn lead to the identity of the self. Spiritual perfection is reached when the self is eliminated, and elimination of conceptual thought is an important part of the process. Take a moment and reflect on the state of mind that Jesus envisions. Space and time no longer exist. When two objects are the same, the space between them is irrelevant. Time measures how long it takes for change to happen. But when everything is the same, there is no changing. So time, like space, no longer exists. Add to this state of mind the ingrained attitude that what people think of you is of no concern. All self-consciousness disappears. Finally, thoughts come and just as quickly go, without meaning. Close your eyes for a moment and put yourself in the mental state I just described. No space, no time, empty thoughts, while completely free from what people think. That is your true nature. It is what is required in order to tit-for-tat harmonize with true reality and make your body irrelevant. It is what it takes to become one with the Father. Can you do it? Yep. The only question is how many lifetimes will it take? But here's the thing about it. Watch that first step, for it is a big one. Once you start down the path, something very real comes alive in you, and it grows in a feeding frenzy. The path itself is transformative. Empathy and compassion take hold once you peek behind the curtain. They take hold because that is who you are at the core, infinitely empathetic and compassionate. Only you don't realize it because your own wills drive you crazy. The more you open the curtain, the more empathetic and compassionate you become. It is just as Jesus said in the parable of the mustard seed. Going forward, the once visible worldwide suffering that surrounds you will increasingly become more obvious, and you will be motivated to do something about it. Death will be a paper tiger for you. You will realize your true nature, and one day you too will die and leave an image on your burial clothes. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you at the next lecture, if the good Lord is willing. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons.